Hey guys, it's Liv here, and in today's video, I'm going to go over how good I think that Sun will be thanks to Terastal in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. A lot of you guys in the rain video seem to really want to see this side as well, so if you enjoy this content and you want to see another video like this, leave a like in the video and subscribe for more, and comment below what your guys' thoughts were. Also, make sure to join the Discord and follow me on Twitter for future updates on other content, and make sure to hit the channel member button for just a couple of dollars a month. It's a free way to, well, not a free way, but it's an easy way to support the channel. With that said, let's get into what Pokemon I think will be really good on the Sun teams. So right off the bat, I will say that Sun has a lot less options in my opinion than Rain, so this is just me covering everything that I think will be viable, but there's obviously room for error, and maybe some new Pokemon get some hidden abilities like Solar Power or Chlorophyll, or even just flat out new Pokemon we haven't seen yet that get these abilities, or even something better that could provide a lot to Sun. But for now, I only have to go off of the returning Pokemon at the very least, and the stuff that it seems pretty likely, if not guaranteed, is returning. So with the start, of course, we do have our Sunsetter being Torkoal. Torkoal, I think, will be Terastal Fire, though I'll be honest, in singles, and this is the single set first, I'll get into the double set afterwards, I don't even think that you'll actually run Terastal and Torkoal. I just think it's a Pokemon that won't really need it. Torkoal's main job is meant to just set Sun, get hazards up, and get the fuck out of there. It's not a Pokemon that you're really going to be breaking with in singles, because typically there's just a lot of Pokemon that would otherwise check Torkoal, and you need it mostly to support your other Pokemon to make them more broken. Torkoal's job in singlers is meant to be an enabler, which is pretty much a stark contrast actually to doubles, where Torkoal is meant to be your sweeper, which in this sort of case, I could actually see Torkoal genuinely being a really good Terastal Pokemon. For Modest Nature, you could always just swap this to Quiet, especially if you were running a Trick Room aspect, which is fairly common on a lot of Suns, and I will say it is something that I did neglect to go into in this video, because truthfully, I think Trick Room is going to deserve its a whole other video, and I didn't want it to overwhelm the Sun aspect, because I unironically thought there were more good Trick Room Pokemon for a Sun team than there were actual Sun setters or Sun abusers for a Sun team. So I'm gonna literally have to cover a whole separate video on Trick Room. I do think it really does warrant its own, because Trick Room will be amazing in this generation in my opinion. Just off of the Pokemon that we know are coming back alone, I cannot see it being unviable. But Quiet would be really good if you were running Torkoal on Trick Room, and I think on a Trick Room team, Torkoal could genuinely be an amazing Terastal option. There are obviously a lot of other ways to run Sun though. For example, you could pair this with a Pokemon like Lilligan and do an After You set, which would be pretty decent for Torkoal for offensive sets. However, ultimately, if you're going to run Terastal Torkoal, I do think that ultimately the Trick Room variants would be the strongest. In this set, basically, you could always swap out Earth Power as well for a Solar Beam, same as Heat Wave in theory, but I do like the option of Dual Fire. This way, when Torkoal takes a bit of damage, you still have Heat Wave as a reliable damage source, instead of needing to go for a Spread Fire option that will do 30 base power, and then also get weakened by Spread and doubles. So hopefully this set, in my opinion, has some good merit. In my opinion, if for anyone who saw the Dex League video for VGC tiering, I think this will be a top 10 Pokemon. And I think that sadly, the only thing that will hold it back on Sun are how good the Pokemon end up being that will support it. Which from here, I will say that the quality of Pokemon get significantly worse for singles and double standards, but we do still have some options that, in my opinion, if you're looking to run a Sun team, could actually be decent for support for Torkoal. So up next, we have Hisui and Lilligan, which is our first actual Chlorophyll Pokemon on the team. Basically, Hisui and Lilligan's job is mostly meant to be a really good physical offensive option for Sun teams, which is pretty uncommon actually among Chlorophyll users. Typically, you'll most likely see Chlorophyll mons that will run special stuff. For example, Venusaur, Vileplume, even regular Lilligan, all are special attackers. But on this moveset, basically, you would take advantage in singles of Sunny Day, just in case a Torkoal was to faint. And then you also have Poison Jab, which is great for fairy matchups, Leaf Blade, which is really here in case a Solar Blade doesn't end up getting onto its moveset. However, even if it does, then there's an argument to be made that you could just run Leaf Blade so then you don't need to have the Sun up to attack. And you have Close Combat as well, which is for the Steel matchup. With these EVs, you actually do perfectly outpace Excadrill, which in my opinion was actually very valuable, especially considering the fact that outside of Lilligan, it is the fastest Sand Setter. So if neither weather, it's just the fastest Weather Sweeper, I should say, outside of Lilligan for viable ones at least. So let's say, for example, there was no weather up and you just had Lilligan on the field. If Excadrill was there as well, I don't need to gamble with stuff like Aerial Ace or X's or Poison Jab. I can just outright Close Combat it and take out Excadrill. With this moveset right here, this one adopts a more VGC feel, and the reason I have Wide Lens over Life Orb is strictly because of item clause. There are a lot of other Sun Pokemon that will benefit from Life Orb that we'll get into in a bit, so I did want to provide this other option here. In this case, it will be Wide Lens, which is mostly here to help with the Sleep Powder accuracy. Similarly, Venusaur actually did a similar trick as well in VGC when it wasn't running Life Orb sets or Cobra Berry sets, so I felt like Lilligan could definitely adopt a pretty similar role and just become a nuisance, outpacing every other Pokemon and going for Sleep Powders on it. Could be really good, especially in matchups that Grass isn't really a favorable option. With this EV spread, you're still outpacing Excadrill. I figured that was the safest bet in this regard. I will say actually that unlike with the single set, you won't have to worry about Excadrill because it doesn't seem like it's going to be in Scarlet and Violet. But even still, you could always adopt this for 85s and just go a little bit lower on the speed. So we're going to be going with just this for now as a failsafe in case if Excadrill does make it into the game. So with that said though, on to our next Pokemon, we do have Lilligan. For the base Lilligan, I actually think this will be one of the only non-stab options for Terastal that will be on a Sun team, being Terastal Fire. This is mostly because Lilligan has a pretty garbage move pool. You don't get Weather Ball, you don't get any sort of coverage. Your best coverage would be basically Pollen Puff. In this case though, with Terastal Fire, you would be able to take advantage of Terra Blast and help with your Steel matchup, your opposing Chlorophyll option matchup, and really just with a lot of other coverage. Fire Grass coverage in general is pretty damning, and with the Sun boosting you as well, this would be a pretty terrifying route to go. On top of this, you could always go with Terastal Ground and Dairy, specifically for like a Heatran matchup, but similarly to how Excadrill is in the game, it doesn't seem like Heatran is either as of right now. However, I do have a little more faith that Heatran will make it to the game at some point. In the last Pokemon Sword and Shield games, every single legend made it in by the Crown Tundra DLC, besides mythical ones, so I don't really see Heatran being left out at a later stage in the meta. But for now though, you could get away with Terastal Fire pretty freely and really have nothing that's actually going to wall you. At least, nothing within reason. Lilligan should be able to do enough damage to most counterplay to where you can just Sleep Powder and Quiver Dance up until you're ready to win. So I think this will be a decent option. You could always also switch out stuff like Terra Blast for after you and make Torkoal the breaker, which especially if you're going for Quiver Dance spam, will be really nice because between the Chlorophyll boosting your speed by 2 times and the Quiver Dance boosting your speed even further from there, Torkoal will basically be unrivaled in speed, which could be pretty decent for it. Moving on to our next Pokemon though, we do have Charizard, which I think will take advantage of Terastal Fire or Flying. My guess is it will be Terastal Flying, mostly just that way then you get a 100% accurate flying move, as Hurricane will be 50% in Sun and Air Slash does like no damage. In fact, Terastal Flying would do more damage even just off the move space power before the Terastal boost than you would do with Air Slash. So I do think the Terastal Flying will be a very solid option, but Terastal Fire could be pretty decent too. The speed on here will be the same for singles or doubles. Base 100 is such a common speed tier that it won't really change. Though I will say the item, if you're doing singles, I think there's a few different items you could do. Choice Specs could be one, which in that case I'd probably throw on Focus Blast over Roost. The other options that I would probably recommend though would be Heavy Duty Boots or maybe Charcoal, but probably Heavy Duty Boots and Life Orb would be the two best in singles. Whereas in VGC, I think it's Life Orb or maybe Chardy Berry, depending on how weak the offensive Pokemon with Rock Slide are. But I can't really see that being a thing because unlike with Sword and Shield, you're not doubling your HP to make this work. Though at the same time, you would be weakening your weakness to Rock by half, so that could be a pretty decent route. Regardless though, I do think that Charizard will be a really good mainstay on Sun teams actually, and it's probably going to be one of the best options weirdly enough, at least as far as doubles goes. I think that and Hisui and Lilligan will be the common 2 Pokemon on Sun. But what about Pokemon that aren't necessarily going to necessarily benefit from Sun? These are Pokemon that might just assist in Sun or even just in general are really good options. For example, we do have Landorus Therian, one of our first Pokemon. Typically, for these last few Pokemon, I'm going over ground types specifically. Grounds are pretty common on Sun teams, obviously. They're common on a lot of teams, but specifically 2 different ones being Landorus and our next ground that I'll go over after the VGC and single sets are 2 of the most common ones, and I did want to highlight some sets that could work. For one, we do have Landorus here with the Stealth Rock set with Stealth Rock, U-Turn, Toxic, and Earthquake. Typically, I do like a little bit more defensive-oriented Landoruses on my Sun teams. Just a personal preference. Scarf is still a really good route, and same as even Swords Dance Landorus. Same as Explosion Landorus, to be honest. It's also another pretty common option in Suns. Personally, though, I'm a huge fan of defensive. With the ZV spread, your goal will be creeping Bisharp, which is pretty valuable, especially because Bisharp is confirmed with the game. And Bisharp's a pretty decent OU Pokemon right now, and I don't actually see that changing for Scarlet and Violet. Terastal will be very kind to Bisharp, in my opinion, with Terastal Dark boosted Sucker Punches. So I do think that with this sort of Landorus, you'd be in pretty good hands since you would creep Adamant, which is the most common nature on Bisharp, and you would have another backup Rocks option, which Rocks and Sun are very important in my opinion. You could help scout for a lot of different items that might be handling you, whether resist berries or offensive life orb options, or even just heavy duty boots. It's a pretty good option to scout for. And having Landorus being able to pivot around into your other Sun options, or even just Torkoal, is pretty valuable here in my opinion. If you're looking for VGC though, I do recommend this sort of moveset with Terra Blast, Rock Slide, Earthquake, and Swords Dance. On this sort of moveset, you could probably run Terra Flying or Ground. The argument would actually be the same for both Terra Blast options, and I wouldn't actually change the move if you're going with Terra Ground, because this would actually give you a single target, really strong ground option, while also boosting your Earthquake, which is spread. So in doubles, I actually do think that Terra Blast would have some merit on Terra Ground sets as well. But Terra Grass would be valuable, especially to handle opposing grass types that would otherwise threaten Sun. And Rock Slide's really good for the offensive fires, without having to risk damaging your own partner. Especially if you're partnered with Torkoal in this sort of scenario, it could be pretty valuable to just click Rock Slide instead. And Swords Dance is really good to help just break past any sort of physically defensive Pokemon that would otherwise take on your hits. White Herb, in my opinion, would probably be your best item choice here, since again, a lot of item competition, so you can't really run Life Orb. And between Lumberry or White Herb, I personally value White Herb more just for opposing Landorus matchup, as well as for things such as Arcanine and Salamence that would otherwise, again, be able to intimidate you. But we do have one more Pokemon I think that will be valuable. Whether you're playing singles or doubles, I do actually think this Pokemon in particular will be a menace in Terastal, and I do think it's a Pokemon that's actually really worth considering here. For the biggest reason, if nothing else, just for the opposing matchups that Terastal teams will otherwise end up having to fight. Now, what Pokemon in particular do I think that's going to be? I just realized the Pokemon's cut, so I'm actually going to skip it. This is the end of the video now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and if you did, leave a like on the video and subscribe for more. I'm sorry for really building up the anticlimactic end. I really thought Mamoswine was in. If for anyone who's curious on the set, in case you're playing a Natdex meta, let's say, this was the moveset. Terra Ice was mostly for Lilligan matchups, and Terra Ground was similar for Landorus, just a really good option. But again, I fucked up. I failed my research, and I forgot that Mamoswine is not slated for Scarlet and Violet as of right now. Hopefully for a DLC that'll change though. Mamoswine will be fucking great on Suns. And I was gonna go into a whole like 3-minute tangent on how Mamoswine would be a really good option for Sun teams to help with Landorus matchups, to help with just Zapdos matchups as well, which could take advantage of stuff like Heat Wave and Revenge off your grass types still. But no, I can't really do that. So I'm just going to end the video abruptly. Shout out to channel members, of course, being Zeke0, Josh, aka Ultra Player, and Mia. Your guys' support is greatly appreciated. If you want to become a channel member today, link down below to that, or you could hit the join button on the channel. Subscribe for more content like this, and Twitter and Discord for updates and videos. And I will see you guys in tomorrow's video, where we're going to be doing a Gigantamax Pokemon tier list. Until then, peace out, guys.